Hi, I'm Ken Winegarden. Grew up in a Christian home. My mother and father were very involved in the church. A lot of on the boards and that type of activity, Cub Scouts, everything else. We sang in choirs and volunteered for a bunch of activities. Then a couple things happened to do with the minister at the time and the church, and my mom and dad withdrew from the church. At the time, I wasn't aware what the situations were and whether they had walked away from faith completely or just the church. Found out years later that it was just the church they walked away from. They still maintained their faith. So growing up, had a relationship and was constantly involved in church activities. Wasn't until later in my life though that I realized that the commitment I needed to make was more personal, and admitting that I needed Jesus in my life and God in my life, and that He wanted a relationship with me. The first step towards that was a football camp ran by Christian athletes, and the different testimonies given and shared stories promoted that I needed to have a better walk and closer walk with God. Years later, through a failed marriage, I ended up going to a Promise Keepers convention, and the messages there spoke loud and clear, and I went forward on an altar call and gave my life back. And just the changes it made in my life were incredible. Dramatically changed the outlook on the situation I was involved in at the current time, and also my employment, my job, life in general, who I wanted to be. I would love to say that was the end of the story and lived happily ever after, but as we know, we're all sinners, we're all living in a fallen world. So there have been a couple other times in my walk where I've walked away and haven't lived the way I should. In this series, Broken, we're learning what that means for our lives. I just wanted to give a couple definitions of broken that I read that I think speak to it. Reduced to fragments, fragmented, ruptured, fractured, not functioning properly, out of working order, infringed or violated, interrupted, disconnected, weakened in strength and spirit, reduced to submission. I think all these different definitions of broken speak to the way that Satan uses his strength, his lies, and his deceit to trick us into believing that we can do it on our own, through our strength. We don't need God's strength or His wisdom, especially when we're in situations where things don't feel like they're working, and we question, unfortunately, where God is in that. I've been through 2 divorces. I've gone through various situations with my children. I'm a correctional officer for 26 years. Obviously, that speaks of itself, of the journey that's been, and the good and bad, the things I've had to experience some people would never even think of. Physically, have dealt for years with depression and the things that brings with it, sometimes not being able to get out of bed. Learned finally and eventually that through total submission to God and turning everything over to Him and giving Him total control over my life is what was required and needed. Also, the past year has been an amazing growth year for me spiritually. And giving everything back to God, I've gone through a number of changes. Physically, I went through a very strict physical diet program, 26-week program, 12 weeks of 4 protein shakes a day, and then the last 14 weeks reintroducing food and minusing the shakes. Through that, I've lost 50 pounds and hope to still do more, but maintaining that area there. So that has changed my health dramatically, giving me my health back. I can do things that I wasn't able to do before. I can, the joke in our classes, we're able to tie our shoes without getting winded. Also, health-wise, I've gone from 6 or 7 pills for health reasons down to 2 now, and looking at getting rid of those 2 shortly too. A lot of that was through prayer, through the commitment I made to the health program, but even just turning it over to God and saying, this is in your hands, Lord. I've tried things my way, they didn't work, so I just turned my life, everything about me, physically, mentally, and spiritually, over to you. And the ability to place my trust in his hands and living that has just been transformational. I went to a counselor, a Christian counselor. I've been dealing with things from my past as well. That has helped dramatically. Just dealing that some of these things, it's not what God wanted, it's not who God would speak of who I am, but that the issues that from my past and Satan's lies changed who I thought I was, and mainly that I was useless and worthless and no good to anybody. Dealt with a couple of suicidal times during my depression, but thankfully God has taken care of that as well. Went to a retreat through John Eldridge's Wild at Heart, and it was a 4-day retreat. It spoke dramatically into my life as to who I am, my identity, that we all live in a fallen world, and that my identity is from God and nowhere else, not from my father, not from my work, not from my marriage or anywhere else. Speaking of marriages, I've remarried for a 3rd time, so I joke that it was like baseball, 3 strikes, I was out this time, or for my benefit and through God's intercession, I hit a home run this time and married to an amazing woman. She has helped me with my faith walk and taught me various aspects and parts, especially forgiveness. I'd like to thank her especially for being a part of this and staying with me and helping me. All the praise and glory goes to God. I went to this retreat and just life-changing things came from it. The weekend after, I was to go to the EMCC business meeting, and driving up there, I was about halfway to the meeting, didn't know a soul that was going to be there. Robin was going to attend with me, but he was coming later. And I remember just hearing the old familiar voices in my head, you're not good enough, what can you offer, why are you attending? And I literally, for the first time in my life, realized that it was an attack from Satan, and pulled over off the highway and stopped the truck and just said, Satan, leave. You have no right to my life. You have no control over my life anymore. I'm a son of God, and he's blessed me, and he wants me to be there, or arrangements wouldn't have fallen into place. So got back on the road, attended, and the weekend was amazing. The first night, there was a praise and worship session. The one song that spoke dearly to me was Break the Chains Off of Me, about God breaking our chains off of us. And I literally, in tears, felt God breaking the chains off of me and removing them. The next day, Saturday night, there was a praise and worship session and a prayer session. So I went forward for various prayer. One part was go talk to somebody you haven't met or didn't know before and pray for each other. And just the things that we discussed and the things we prayed for each other just proved that it was a pure God thing. He spoke of things from my past and my heart that he would never have known. So obviously it showed and maintained that God was in control. The most surprising and shocking event of that night was I went forward for healing prayer. Joked with the 2 guys that were praying for me and said, the list is long, but the main thing is my depression and my heart, so I'd like prayer over that. And we were praying and talking and sharing, and the one gentleman looked up and had just a shocked look on his face and said, God has just removed your depression, you're healed. And that instant that he was talking about, I felt that. I felt a release. I felt a major weight off of my shoulders, and I could tell that God had changed things. And so just those 2 weekends, how they intertwined and how they spoke into each other and into a continuing build of the facts and statements that I was learning. So even though we get divided and we get separated and we get broken in our walk and in our lives, the main thing I'd like to share is that God is always there. It's me personally that I'm the one that's walked away. I'm the one that's left and lived differently, and He's always been there. Even when I was doing that, He was present. And it's not until I give total submission to Him that I realize that that's what I need to do, and then you know that He's there constantly. You're aware. I shared with Jeremy during one of our talks through a hard time that I went from before to I could hear Him constantly, and listening to Him was very easy to, where are you? I didn't seem to have that in my walk, and now with where I'm at spiritually and where my relationship is with God, I'm happy to say that that's back, and it's something that is attainable for everyone. It's what Jesus wants. He wants personal relationship with us. If we just take the time and make the effort to attain that with Him and share that with Him. And He's also a wonderful, amazing God. No matter what we've done, no matter where we are, He's there for us. He loves us. He accepts us. And our past doesn't need to define us. Our future is defined by God's love. And the past year, the changes, I also shared with Jeremy during that appointment. Before I've gone through this past year, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual changes and growth, and a year ago, 2 years ago, any one of those would have put me on a reverse pattern and a downward spiral. And this year, all 5 weren't even a factor. They felt comfortable. I was able to handle it, and I was able to move forward. But I know that is because of God's control, and God's strength is backing me. And I know that I have to live with His Word constantly being a part of my life. And I joke that I've made the right choices, but the joke with that is I've made the choices that He would make and He would want me to make, and through that I can continue my walk forward and live for Him. And the rest of it takes care of itself. One of the other main changes in the past year was a change of employment. Transferred to Brantford Jail, and in December it closed. We were given an opportunity to put in picks for where we wanted to go. Our catchment jail was Maplehurst, and I put in first for Stratford and then Maplehurst. There was a senior officer above me that wanted Stratford, so I thought that was out, but felt comfortable in praying about it and listening, and just placed it in God's hands and said, God, where I end up is where you want me and where you're placing me. It's not my pick, my control, it's yours. So I was pleasantly surprised when I opened the envelope and saw that I got my pick of Stratford Jail. And just even in the past 8-9 months, there's been interaction with staff and things that have proven that it's where God has placed me and where He wants me. Some of the changes and some of the interaction has proven that. So just once again confirms the ability to trust and place it in God's hands. That's where He wants us.